Hi everyone, welcome to today's Fringe Academy workshop. It's on COVID-19 risk assessment guidance with Hybrid Consultancy. We're joined here with Becky Stevens from Hybrid Consultancy, who's going to be leading a presentation and then a Q&A on risk assessment guidance for venues, especially regarding COVID-19. So Becky, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Cameron. Right, I'm going to share my screen and then go through the presentation. Very much a caveat here is that all this guidance and advice is based on today's date, the 18th of September, and as we know, lots of things do change almost hourly at the moment, so do always check the most recent government guidance for when you're carrying out your risk assessment as well. Right, so yes, Hybrid Consultancy. We have been doing a lot of COVID-19 risk assessments throughout lockdown, and we're working with a number of businesses like film studios. I can't seem to change the slide now. Oh, here we go. Right, so I'm Becky Stevens. I'm one of the founders of Hybrid Consultancy. We are a tried and trusted team of experts, and we came together. We've predominantly got a background within events and health and safety for events to support businesses in the wake of COVID-19. So we offer cohesive solutions to organisations of all sizes, enabling them to trade safely, legally and confidently. As I said, I've got background in events. I've been working in events for about 20 years, both inside and outside, and I'm a qualified health and safety professional with over 10 years experience in that field, working in major events and conferences within venues, education colleges, cinema venues, and now as well also providing COVID assessments for film studios and offices and all sorts of venues. I am a technical member of IOSH, qualified NEBOSH general certificate, and a qualified fire safety risk assessor. And I also sit on the National Outdoor Events Association Council, and I've contributed a lot to the reopening of events guidance. So, health and safety. I'm sure all of you who run venues have carried out risk assessments before, and this really isn't an intention to teach you sort of the things you already know, but really to help you with this extra layer now of health and safety that you need to put in place to be COVID secure. So we're going to talk a bit through about how to make the guidance clear, why it's so important that you have a risk assessment, and also think about the implications and risks associated with getting it wrong. So making the guidance clear, as I said, as my caveat is that this presentation on the 18th of September, things are changing all the time. The messaging is changing. You know, are we wearing face masks? Are we not wearing face masks? Are we staying at home? Are we going out? You know, it really is quite a full-on job to keeping up with all the guidance. And we have been since the start of lockdown. We've been making sure we're constantly reading, constantly updating. And the things that you see in the news and are only a snippet of the actual full-on guidance that's out there, and it's really, really important that you take the onus to go and to check out the guidance fully. The uk.gov website has the best, has all the official guidance on it, and it's quite, I want to make it really clear that this is all guidance, but there is some legislation within it. So you need to really look carefully at the uk.gov website and at Health and Safety Executive website to make sure that you are doing everything reasonably practicable to reduce the transmission of COVID-19. So when looking at your risk assessment, and I'm predominantly looking at this from the point of view as you are participating in a Brighton Fringe event, and you may not necessarily have an audience within your venue. So we'll be looking at the kind of practical areas about if you're filming within your venue, equally if you are going to have a small audience within your venue as well. So, but these are all the different things that you need to think about in specific relation to your venue. So the importance of a risk assessment. You have a duty of care under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 to carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment. As an employer, or as anyone that is, you are inviting people to work within your venue, you must carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment to show that your venue is safe to work. If you don't have one, you can be prosecuted under the breach of the Health and Safety at Work Act. It's a very useful planning tool. By carrying out a risk assessment, it will highlight to you all the measures that you need to put in place to be COVID secure. It's really important to talk about your staff safety. Make sure you talk to them about the measures you're putting in place. Also get their input. I often know that a manager might write a risk assessment, but actually when it comes to the practical implication of how that's going to work on the ground, that might not necessarily be effective. So do talk to your crew, your tech, your cleaners, and make sure they all understand the importance of the measures that you're putting in place. And also think about the budget implications. I know, having carried out COVID-19 risk assessments over the past few months, that there is an increase in cost for anyone that is reopening. When you're thinking about your enhanced cleaning, obviously the different measures you need to put in place for enhanced hygiene, all those certain things, PPE, etc., they're all going to add an extra level of cost to you. And if you are bringing customers back into your venue, having a COVID-19 risk assessment will really increase customer safety and customer confidence in attending your venue. They will then know, if you are able to show that you have carried out a risk assessment and the measures you're putting in place, then you know that people could have confidence to return to your premises. The final, most important thing about a risk assessment, in my opinion, is that you need to be prepared for a possible infection or outbreak at your place of work and what you would do, and obviously the financial implications that might occur if you've spent a lot of time and money reopening and then you need to fully shut because all your workforce are infected. So things to consider in your risk assessment. Teams or bubbles. I call them bubbles, but you can call them teams. So where possible, you should put your staff and contractors into teams or bubbles. These bubbles should not mix with other bubbles. And you need to think about how you'll socially distance the bubbles all time, including during breaks. So when I'm talking about bubbles, I'm thinking about, for instance, if you have a technical crew and they could be within one bubble. And then if you have your artists, they could be within a different bubble, management within a different bubble. You know, you sort of got to think about how you protect each bubble. So if you have people mixing up all the time, that increases the risk of transmission of infection. So therefore, if you're, for instance, if someone in your crew was to come down with COVID-19, then that would mean that really only that crew bubble need to isolate. And that means that you don't need to shut everything down. But if you haven't maintained bubbles and you haven't protected other people in your workplace, then you very possibly could lose all of your workforce. I want to clarify here about the rule of 6. And again, a caveat that this is applicable today, 18th of September. The rule of 6 is something that's been announced this week about mixing and not going above more than 6 people. It does not apply in work settings where there is a COVID-19 risk assessment. But it is good practice that when you are working with lots of different people in different places, for instance, if you are a freelance technician and you're having numerous artists coming in and you do not exceed more than 6 people in your work bubble. So you could have a number of people in your venue. You could have, depending on the size of your venue, you could have 60 people in your venue, but if you maintain them within work bubbles, then you are significantly reducing the risk of transmission. And we'll talk about the other measures that you need to put in place to do that. So here's a bit of an overview, and I suggest that for those of you that are watching a recording, and I will also send this bit of text, this is really important that you have this at all times and you share this with your staff. These are the symptoms of COVID-19 that people need to be aware of, and make sure that they do not come to work if they have any of these symptoms. We'll run through it quickly, you will know them anyway. A high temperature, generally we're saying that's over 38 degrees. A new continuous cough, so coughing continuously for more than an hour, and a loss of change to your sense of smell or taste. If you have any of the symptoms, do not come to work. It's absolutely critical. you know, and because otherwise you could be increasing the risk of transmission. I have got in here that you should get an antigen test, but obviously we know at the moment that can be quite difficult. So self-isolation until you can do that is really important. Health checks. As a venue manager, prior to anyone coming to work in your venue, you should make sure that they all, you send them a information sheet which covers all your risk assessment recommendations and a health check form. I have a sample one that I can send out after this, which you can use. So that health check form is a standard form that I'm sure many of you may have seen already, which is whereby you ask, you know, have you had the temperature? Have you had any of these symptoms? Equally, are you living with anyone that has these symptoms? On the day of the performance or rehearsal, when people come to your venue, you need to carry out a health check prior to them coming in. So that means that you need to, as they arrive, you carry out a verbal check. Have you had a cough? Have you had a temperature? And then you should, best practice is to take a temperature check before they come into the venue. Obviously, if they're all fine and they don't have a temperature, then that's fine. And you've got a record of that then. And it's really important to keep a record of this and to keep this on file so that you can show that you did everything reasonably practicable to reduce the transmission of COVID-19 within your venue. Obviously, if a person does have a temperature, they should be sent home immediately. Now, that person may have run to work, they may have been late, they may have cycled, so they may be a little bit hotter than normal. So it might be, if they do say that they've done that, then don't instantly send them home. Let them cool down a minute and retake their temperature. Things to consider in your risk assessment: social distancing. We all know, we understand the concept of social distancing. We understand that we should be staying 2 meters apart at all times. It is really important, and throughout your venue, you should try and maintain a 2 meter distance between people at all times, and particularly between your bubbles. So the reason that there's been a lot of studies, and it has been shown obviously that the droplets from COVID-19 can travel quite far distances in the air, particularly if someone were to sneeze or to cough. So by increasing the distance between people or between bubbles, you reduce the risk of transmission of the virus. When this isn't possible, and as we know from working all the time and working in production, it isn't possible to have a 2 meter distance between people, you should use the 1 meter plus rule. So what does 1 meter plus mean? It means that you operate within a bubble. You wear face covering when you're within that bubble and when you can't maintain the 2 meters. So for instance, if you are a crew and you've got to lift something and you've got to move it from one place to the other, obviously you can't maintain your 2 meters. You should be wearing a face mask during that time period. You should also be looking at all the other measures like increased sanitation and increased cleaning, increased hygiene and increased ventilation. So if you are setting up a venue and you are moving equipment from one place to another, face mask on, doors open as much, and windows open as much as possible, and to make sure that you've really got good ventilation going around your venue. Also think about social distancing on your staging layout, really important for your performances. Do you need to set this up differently to accommodate different performances? Have a real think about who's coming into your venue and who's performing. Now, the guidance would state that if you are a performer, you should be within a designated bubble, essentially. So if you are a band and that's your group of 6, that's your bubble, and they should maintain like that. And that's what you need to do. But equally, that you need to discuss with your performers about how they need to be set up and whether they are also happy to perform in a closer environment, and if that works for them within their allocated bubbles. Cleaning. Regular sanitisation of door handles and other high touch areas. A minimum of every 2 hours during operating hours. It sounds exceedingly excessive, but you've got to do it. You've got to keep cleaning everything that gets touched all the time. So either you're frequently cleaning surfaces that are touched regularly, so things like kettles, refrigerators, door handles, door push handles, anywhere that you're constantly touching. You should have hand cleaning facilities, so that's sinks, or hand sanitizers should be available anywhere to any entrance of any room where people eat, and should be used by staff when entering and leaving the area. Regularly clean taps and washing facilities, light switches, toilet flush and seats, door handles and push plates, handrails and staircases and corridors. Put this in your risk assessment and make sure that you follow it. It is really, really important. The increased cleaning is so vital to making sure that you reduce the transmission of the virus. If you think about, if you're walking around the venue, you're touching different things, you've touched your mouth, you've touched this, by having a really good cleaning system in place, you are really helping to make sure that the virus is not transmitted. And that is a really critical part, but it is an increased cost. Do you need to have a cleaner on duty the whole time whilst you've got performances taking place? Possibly. Or are you going to allocate that to a member of staff? Think about that and think about how that's going to work, because it is a big job, but someone does need to do it, and it shouldn't really be put on to somebody who's also got another job to do. Hygiene, as we talked about before, put hand sanitizers at the entrance with a sign for people to use before and after using door entry system. Frequent hand washing should take place. Put signage around that reminds people. It's really easy, and I know, having been on a number of film sets recently, that day one everyone's brilliant, by day two, day three, everyone's back to doing their jobs as normal and isn't remembering to wash their hands a lot. So put the signs up and remind people. Request that contractors bring their own equipment and do not share tools with other contractors. Again, something that we've commonly done. So let's make sure that people are advised in advance to bring all their own equipment with them. Microphone heads are something that people don't often think about, but they should be washed between uses, or you should use disposable ones. Do not share microphone heads. Obviously, they are a key area where the virus can be transmitted. And another thing that is very good, if you can do it and you have enough, is to allocate toilets to work bubbles. So obviously, if you've got your crew bubble, your artist bubble, management bubble, see if you can put one toilet each in place for them, so that then that there is, again, reduces the risk of transmission. Ventilation, really, really important. Make sure the premises is well ventilated, open windows and doors throughout the building where possible. Keep doors to rooms open unless fire doors. Cannot stress enough, do not prop open fire doors. They are there for a reason. They are there to protect your life. So please, please, please do not prop them open to increase ventilation. If you do have fire doors throughout your building, you could also consider about putting in another form of entry system in place. So a foot push system, or where people don't need to use touch the handles all the time to open through the doors. If you're using additional cooling or heating systems, they should be extraction units or single unit air conditioning units with direct access to internal walls. Air conditioning systems which circulate the air back around the building are not advisable, and it would be you should really get advice before using these systems by the person that installed them. It is not possible, if it's not possible to ventilate the room properly, you should leave a minimum of 24 hours between room use and have a full clean of the room. By ventilating and circulating air around the room, it really helps with moving the virus and making sure that it doesn't settle in areas. And so with that, in addition, with your cleaning and your social distancing, are your 3 absolutely critical points. Personal protective equipment. So face coverings are technically not personal protective equipment, but they fall within this area, and I think it's easier to talk about it like this. So face coverings, homemade or bought, should be used when you cannot maintain social distance. If for any reason you cannot wear a face covering, if you have asthma or some other medical issue which means that you can't wear a face covering, then you really should not break the 2-meter distance between people. It's really important for you and for them. If you use personal protective equipment for your role, like gloves or hard hat, you must continue to use them. So as I said, if you cannot wear a face covering, you must maintain 2 meters from other people at all times. What are the risks if you get it wrong? Well, you could get shut down. You could get a fine from the HSE. And really, most importantly, you continue to spread the virus. And the longer the virus spreads, the longer it means that we can't properly reopen, and the longer it means that we can't all get back to our daily lives. And as well, it's really important that we don't continue to increase the rate of infection. So, questions?
Wow. Hello. Sorry.
Hello.
Thanks for that, Becky. That's great. So in terms of when you're talking about bubbles in the venue, do you recommend doing that? I mean, I guess it's down to how the venue would work, but would you recommend doing that by department or like sort of by a shift pattern if it was more the people who would be on the same shift, like actually working together?
That's a really good question. Yeah, and actually
the same areas, or
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's a really good question. And actually, yeah, absolutely. If you have got teams that are working in shifts, then they should stay within those bubbles, because that might be a venue manager and crew and that could be one bubble. And then it does depend, obviously, on your venue setup. It could be that if you're only coming in for performances of a certain time, then I would advise then you keep it smaller. But working in shifts and also staggering shift start times as well is really important, because it just means that you're not all arriving at the same time and then all queuing up all together to have your temperature checked. So
interesting. And in terms of so there's a point in at some point you said, you were talking about ventilation, and if a room isn't ventilated enough, about leaving it 24 hours and then doing a clean in between. I guess it's hard to say, or what would you consider being ventilated enough? Is that having air conditioning and a good airflow, or is that?
Yeah. So think about
how do you measure things like that as well?
So if you have a venue that has a basement room, like the latest bar perhaps, then obviously that is not going to be able to get a lot of air going down into it. So that would be a room that I would leave for 24 hours between uses, and give it a good clean. If you have a venue like the Concord, where you can open all the doors and it's great, and you can basically do that between performances. Open up all the fire door, the external fire doors, let all the air flow through, and you're good to go.
Fantastic. And you said, so we've got a couple of resources that you'll be sending over that will be available to all of the venues as well. So that'll be, we'll put those on Aventatron and on our website as well for those. And I'm just trying to think of any more questions. It was very, very informative, and definitely, I think hopefully will give a bit of confidence on going forward. But again, as we said, that all of this is definitely subject to change, especially with government guidance. But you recommend just checking the UK government website and HSE regularly? Or
yeah. So
with all of that?
Yeah. So I'll send out some stuff. I'll send you some information, which will have some guidance notes. What's critical is that if you carry out a risk assessment, you're going to be looking at all those key points. So you're going to cover yourself by doing that. So making sure that you look at where we are within the risk level, because at the moment we're on like level 4, which meant that we could have like actual performances, but not at full capacity, like within venues. But we might drop back down to like level 3, which would mean that we couldn't have live performances taking place. So obviously look at those different aspects that you've got going on and look at where that is changing. But I'll send out some guidance for the risk assessment and a worker health check form as well that you can use, and just work through it. And then also within that guidance, there'll be some links as well for you to look at. So.
And that's great. In terms of if there was drastic change from government advice, or just changes in general over the next few weeks to the month, is it recommended to keep updating your risk assessment based on the information that you receive?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would definitely take your COVID-19 risk assessment as a dynamic risk assessment. I mean, it's definitely
Okay.
something that I've seen with some of my clients, is that, you know, as each bit of guidance changes, obviously we've updated and changed. For instance, the 1 meter plus rule, that might be, we might be told in a month that actually we can only have 2 meter distancing. So, you know, think about that.
Definitely.
And think about those measures. Also, think about, for instance, where you, if we do end up, let's see in 2 weeks we have a amazing and it's great and everyone's better and we're going back to live performances, but we do with full capacity and we have measures in place. Again, that will, you know, think about that and how that will change your risk assessment.
Great, amazing.
Be confident though to carry out a risk assessment and to make sure that it works for you, because if you are a business and you have a risk assessment, then, you know, can make sure that you are effective and you are open, and you don't need to abide by the rule of 6 and those other measures.
Definitely. As a note to venues watching this as well, the where you would upload your risk assessment in Eventatron, which is our registration software, that is you're able to update the file on there at any point. So if you do have any changes to your risk assessment, it's always good to make sure that you've got the most updated one attached to your venue. So just really making sure that you keep up to date with that. And I guess the main thing just moving forward is to make sure that you're communicating and keeping everyone updated with any changes or any actions that need to be made, especially amongst all of your team within the venue.
Absolutely. And as well, you know, obviously if any venue, just a little plug, but if any venue does want us to come and carry out a risk assessment and to assess, we can do that. So if anyone is feeling that they're not confident to do that, then just let us, you know, get in touch.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm sure we'll have Hybrid Consultancy and Becky's details available for venues to get in contact.
Thanks very much for this. I'm sorry I've been silent. I was waiting on hold for quite a long time, so I was actually watching the presentation. Everything's up in the air really after the announcement from the government today about the closing down of hospitality businesses for a short period of time. So it's all very uncertain. I don't suppose you've got any inside tracks there.
No,
like everyone else.
No, unfortunately not. I mean, but at the moment, it's one of those. It's one of those that I think if you're doing these recordings within the venues and they're not open to the public, then that's fine. You can continue to do so. But it's obviously anywhere where you're starting to bring in members of the public and that area. But yeah, we shall wait and see, because they're not saying that we've got to close down at the moment. They're not saying that we have to shut offices or any other places of work. So I think if you're coming in and performing and streaming or without an audience, then you can still continue at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we've got an online capability now, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, which is great, and it's so important, you know, for us to be able to participate and to encourage, you know, making sure that we are getting access to all the brilliant art and culture, because you know, it's been so restricted. So if there's anything you know, we can do to help.
That'd be brilliant. That's brilliant.
Definitely. Wow.
Well, thank you.
Well, I'm just gonna pause the recording here for a moment, but thank you for anyone watching. And if you do need any more advice, you can just give Participant Services a call or an email at takepart@brightonfringe.org.